Rigging is the process of adding a virtual skeleton to your model in order to deform the mesh of the model with the skeleton in order to animate motion. So before we get into rigging the Rhino, there's a couple things I want to do. The first is if I have my pivot in the center of my model, I'm going to want to move the model and the pivot to the center of origin. So if this model is off somewhere else in the scene, we'll want to kind of fix this up before we get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit D to move the pivot, and then I'm going to move it to where I feel like is the center of mass of the model, somewhere in the middle or towards the back where I might position that root joint. Um, and then I'm going to want to snap to point, and I'm going to want to move that pivot to the bottom of my model. And then I'm going to hit D, and then I'm going to turn off snap to point and turn on snap to grid. And I'm going to then move this model to the center of the grid. So now I have my model and it's positioned here in the center. It's going to be about where I'm going to put that root joint, or where the center of motion of where how this animal moves will be coming from, and make sure that it's centered left to right as well, or across the Z or across the X, as well as in the Y, that it's right in that center. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just say edit, delete all by type history on the model. I'm going to make sure it's named Rhino Geo. And then I'm also going to, in my channel box here, I want these to be 0. I want these to be frozen. I want these channels to be 0 and the scale to be 1. So when I'm completely done, if I go to scale this model, it'll scale from that center. And it may maintain its kind of position on the base of the scene, or at the 0, 0, or kind of like on the floor. So when I scale something, it's going to scale from that center point. So this is really nice. And then when I'm done, I'm going to then select that model, edit, delete all by type history, and then finally I'm going to modify freeze transformations. And now you'll see that those channels, the global transforms, are 0 in the rotate and translate, and also value 1 in the scale. So the next thing I want to do, and this is something that I had created in my scene, is, let me turn off snap to grid here, is I created a little eye. This is before we get into rigging. I'm going to create the eyes. Now I have the eye of I have the eye socket here on the Rhino, and it's just kind of black in there, but I want to then put an eyeball. I have this material placed on my second parts material. So I'm going to kind of position this left eye somewhere in the socket. Now I'm going to kind of make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to frame this up so I'm toggling around it by hitting F. Let's just kind of embed this for now somewhere in this eye socket, somewhere like this. Now this is just a sphere, and I've rotated this sphere so that it's parallel to the way, it comes in looking like this, the sphere with its kind of axes this way. So scaling in this direction, I kind of rotated it around and then scaled it. Okay, so I think that that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this and call it left eye geo. Again, I always kind of, just for good practice, even though here I know it's a mesh, polygon mesh object because of this icon, I also just have that geo at the end to organize everything. And now what I'll do for this is I'm going to also modify freeze transformations so that my pivot point is kind of oriented towards the world. And then what I'm going to do is, in order to duplicate this exactly across the model, since the model is symmetrical, I am going to maybe look from a top view. So let's look from the top view here, and I can also hit wireframe. And I'm going to move this pivot. So this is how I'm going to this is a hack in order to duplicate this object across to duplicate it and kind of maintain its transform value. So I'm going to hit D to modify the pivot of this object, and I'm going to snap to grid, and I'm going to put that here in the center. And I'm going to hit D again. And then I'm going to go here, and with my left eye, I'm going to hit duplicate. But then here in the scale, this is the hack, is I've duplicated that left eye, right here it is. I'm going to double click on this and rename it. I'm going to name it right eye geo. Okay, and then I'm going to actually give this a scale of -1 in the Z, and that's going to duplicate and kind of pull that model in an inverse fashion so that it stays at that so it's repositions it with the correct rotation and the correct movement and and rotation, all those transforms that the original one had. So now with these two, I'll do the same thing. I'll just say modify freeze transformations, and then I will also maybe say modify center pivot for each one of these eyes so that their pivot is not in the center here, but back in the center of that eyeball. So center pivot for both of those. And then just for good practice, select everything in your scene, edit, delete all by type history, and we should be ready to start to rig. Maybe the last thing I'll do is just drop a new material on these two eyes. Let's give it a fong. Let's make it black, kind of shiny. Now I have an eyeball in those two eye sockets. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do is just to go to my channel box layer editor here in the display layers. I'm going to select all three pieces of geometry, and I'm going to go ahead and add a display layer for those so that I can restrict my ability to click on them while I'm working on the rig. And I'm also going to rename this geometry or just geo or whatever so that we know what that is. So that's all the geometry. Okay, so now when we're going to go to rig this and to add a virtual skeleton, we're going to want to start from a side view. So let's go to this orthographic view, and I've toggled on here. These are also some rigging. I'm in my rigging menu set. That's the first thing to know. And then these are some rigging tools that we have. So this allows selectability over different objects in the scene, because sometimes with a rig, we might have locators or curves, joints, the mesh, and other things. So we can turn on or off selectability from these tools, which is really handy. But the first thing I'm going to do is go up to in my rigging menu set again, is go to skeleton, and I'm going to create joints. So now I have my create joint tool is here. And the other thing I'm going to do is under shading, I'm going to turn on X-ray joints. And what this does is this makes them visible in the scene, whether they're embedded within a mesh or not. And then the very first thing I'm going to do is place that root joint. So I might place that actually back here in the back, maybe somewhere right around there will be my first joint. Now that looks a little small, so I can go to my tool settings here, and let's go to my attribute editor for this bone. Let's give this bone, let's say what 1 looks like. That's a little big, but like maybe 0.5. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to give it a radius of 0.5. So then let me also change that here. These are all kind of short bones. I'm just going to give it a radius of 0.5 in the tool settings of this tool as well. And now I have in my outliner, you see I have this joint 1. This is the root joint in our joint hierarchy. And so I'm going to have to build this hierarchy in a couple different steps. So the first thing I might do is then position another up and I'm actually snapping to grid, which I want to turn that off. So I just did a Command Z or Control Z to undo what I just did. I want to be able to, I don't want it to be snapping to the grid at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my second joint here. And this is, now you can see that we have the root joint, and we have the second joint, and that second joint, joint 2, is a child object of the root joint. So the root joint is going to control all of the joints in the hierarchy, and then this second one is connected to it. And we also see that there's this kind of arrow indicator for the bone on how the direction of the hierarchy. So I'm going to position one there, and then maybe I'll position the next one here, maybe then one here by the shoulder. I think one at the neck. And then, I might want to put one in the center by the head, or I can just kind of put one at the tip. I think that this head is going to move all kind of with the neck as one chain. So I'm just going to put one here at the tip. And then I'm going to hit enter, or I'm going to hit select, and then this is my first joint hierarchy. Now, because my object, my Rhino here, is in the center, and here I don't have X-ray joints turned on, so I might turn those on. It's in the center of my object because I was using that orthographic view. You need to be working orthographically when you're adding joints so that it kind of knows we're just working with 2 coordinates in order to place those joints. Okay, so now I'll go back to my front view here, and I'm going to rename these. I'm going to call this root joint, and I'm going to say R. I'm going to say the name of the joint and then _J for joint. Then this one I might call spine 1 _J. This one might be spine 2 _J. This one will be spine 3. And then this one will be neck. And then this one will be head. And I'm just double clicking to rename. Okay, and now I have that first joint hierarchy is labeled and we can see it there. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add more joints. I'm going to actually add the back of this rhino. So I'm going to maybe add one here, one at the tail, one at the tip of the tail. And now I'm going to go in and name these. This is going to be back joint. And then this one is going to be tail joint. And then this will be tail end joint. Okay. So that's my second hierarchy. Now this joint, I want to connect to the root joint. So what I'm going to do with this hierarchy here, right? They're not connected. You don't see a bone between them. And I have these two different hierarchies. So it's pretty easy to parent them together. I just middle mouse button over this hierarchy. I can collapse it, make it easier. And I'm going to middle mouse button and I'm going to drop it on top of the root joint. And now you see that we have this bone has been created. And now I have from the root, I also have this back end as well. All right, so now from the back, let's add some more joints. I'm going to need them in the leg. So I'm going to maybe put one here, one at the, maybe where the, so one at the hip, one at the knee, one at the base of the foot, and one at the tip of the foot. Okay, and then again, let's go ahead and name these. So this one is going to be, I'm going to start with the left side. And so I'm going to name this L for left side and make sure you have that in the beginning of your naming convention that you have L for left or R for right. So L, hip, J. I'm going to drill down, and now this one is going to be L underscore knee, J. And then this is going to be L underscore foot, J. And then the last one is going to be L underscore toe, J. And I'm also going to have to say that maybe this is knee, and I'm going to call this back underscore back because we'll have the front legs as well. So this one is going to be foot, back. This one is going to be toe, left toe, back. Okay. So that's how I'll name them here. And then let's do we can go ahead and take this hip and let's actually attach it here to that back joint. So let's take the hip, let's middle mouse and put it under the back, and now it's all connected. And now let's go ahead and add some more to the front. Let's add the shoulder. Maybe we'll add a shoulder here, and then we'll add the front knee and then the back and then the toe. Okay, so let's go ahead and rename these. I'm going to name this left L for left shoulder joint. And then this one's going to be left knee front joint. Now I could call it elbow or something else, but as a quadruped, I'll just name it knee, and left foot front. No, I say foot front joint. And then here, the left toe front joint. Okay. And then the shoulder, I think I'll make that a child of spine 3. So there it is, spine 3. So this left shoulder, I'm going to drag and drop it under spine 3. Okay, a couple more joints I'm going to put in. I'm going to put one at the base of the ear and the tip of the ear. And I'm going to hit select to complete that joint hierarchy. And then I'm going to put one at the eye. And you'll see that later. So this one is going to be left ear joint. And then this one's going to be left ear tip joint or end, whatever. Then this one is going to be left eye joint. And then this eye is going to go to this neck joint. So I'm going to middle mouse and drop it under the neck. And this ear as well is going to go to the neck. Okay, so now that's all I'm doing from this side view. And we can turn off maybe the visibility of our geometry for a moment, and we can see this is our skeleton at this point. Now I need to pull these objects out. So what I'm going to do with this kind of complete is go in and select individual joints, and now I'm going to translate those. So we have them positioned in this, we have them positioned in the Y and the X, but not in the Z value. So I'm going to move this in the Z and position it where I think it should go in the model. I'm going to do the same thing with this knee and kind of position it a bit in the center of our model. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing with the back, and I'm going to make sure I'm doing it on the left side. So let's pull this out, toggle around your model as you're deciding where exactly you're going to position this, and do the same where we're just kind of pulling in the Z direction these joints. All right, and I'm going to do the same here for the eye. So let's go in. I'm going to have to select it in the outliner here. So I'm going to position this eye right there in the Z value, and we'll do the same thing for the ear. Let's pull that ear over here, and then maybe the tip of the ear can come out like this and rotate a bit. All right, so now that I have that done, I am going to mirror these joints from the left side to the right side. So I hit 4 to turn on wireframe for a moment so we can see our joints a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with maybe the shoulder. So I'll start with this. I want to mirror this left side to the right side. Everything's going to be the same since it's symmetrical. I don't have to build the joints again. And the way I'm going to do that is going to say down under skeleton, and I'm going to say mirror joints. And let's look at our options for this. So this is what you'll see when we are looking at the tool for the first time. And you see how I had L here for the sides of this joint hierarchy that I want to then mirror that have duplicate kind of symmetrical joints on the other side. So I go into this where I say search for L, and then I'm going to replace it with R. And that way it's going to it's going to rename everything. It's going to cut down on a lot of time. And then I have to decide which axis I'm mirroring across. And this is the XY axis. So the X to the Y, basically, I want to mirror across the Z value. And I'm going to just say mirror. And now I have those same joints on the other side of the body. And they have the same names. It's just the L has been replaced with R. So we can do the same for the back leg here. And because I already set my conditions and the options here, I can just hit mirror joints and it's going to mirror the ones in the back. Let's do the same for this eye joint and say mirror joints, and then the same for the ear. Might be easier if I turn on just shading mode, but not shading with textures. Now I can really see what's going on. So select this ear joint and then mirror joints. Okay, so I have my joint hierarchy is complete here in the model. What I'm going to do, and everything's been named correctly, is this is really handy too. So if I select this top root joint, I can go to select hierarchy, and that will select everything in that hierarchy without me having to toggle open all of the children objects that are here displayed in the outliner. And then in my display layer here, I'm going to add a new layer. So this last button is create a new layer and assign selected objects. And this way we can have greater control over what we're displaying in our viewport or what we're able to click on or not. Remember, I'm not able to click on this, the model itself, because I have it restricted here in my display layers. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to call this joints, or I can call it skeleton or whatever. So now I can turn on and off the visibility and do other things that will help me to display it. I'm going to turn off the restriction for the geometry at this time. And then the last thing I like to do is you see that these joints have a orientation to them, right? So this orients the X in this up, and this one orients the X down. So in order to just make this a lot simpler for myself, I'm going to select the root. I'm going to say select hierarchy, and then I'm going to go to skeleton. I'm going to say orient joints. Look at my options, and I'm just going to say, this is what it'll look like when you start it. I'm going to just say orient joint to world, and I'm just going to say orient, and that's going to change all of these joint orientations to those world values. So I'm happy with that. Now I know that this is going to be the 0, 0 position for all of these joints, and that they all have the same, if I go and hit the rotate tool, that rotate tool is going to remain the same for each joint, its orientation. All right, and so that's our joint hierarchy, and that's how we build our skeleton. In the next video, I'll show you how to skin and then how to paint the weights so that we are um, designating influence over the mesh itself. Each one of these joints is going to exert some kind of influence on the vertices around it. So how do we designate which vertices are going to be affected by which joints? And so we'll get to that in the next video.